Hey everybody, this is Stan Wanglund, and welcome to episode 23 of Just Thinking. I appreciate you checking in with me and listening to the daily psychological tips, affirmations, little 15-second YouTube shorts. Those are fun to do, and they're interesting. It's very hard to make something meaningful in under 15 seconds, and it's a lot of fun. Picking out things that I think are important for myself, for you, for anybody. Today's show is going to be, sadly, another one on the Ukraine situation, but from a different perspective, I have to say. There's so much going on in the world. It's reminiscent of when I stopped doing my original podcast, Just Thinking, when everything was Trump, 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 Trump. And my goodness gracious, it was, it was very hard to do humor. It was very hard to get into a lot of other things because everything starts taking a dark tone with people. uh, and it's like you're almost being negligent to people's grief or misery or something if you kid around and fool around about something, and you certainly don't want to make a light out of anything with anything seriously political. Or, my goodness gracious, the stuff that's going on in the Ukraine right now is just horrific, to say the least. But there's horrific things going on in the world all the time, and I actually did a little clip the other day. So you got to stop. I don't mean you, just you. It could be me, it could be anybody. You have to stop doomsday scrolling continuously. And I'm a great observer of human behavior, whether I'm watching the news, seeing, a more liberal-oriented news like MSNBC versus the nightly news or Fox News or some independent thing, commercials, movies, just the tone of our culture, the psyche, the tone of people, where they're coming from, how they're acting. My goodness, I have so many shows to do on that. I mean, it's the changing role of males versus females. Stuff in terms of cultural changes with the LGBTQ um, um, populations, normalizing that for society. Taking different narratives, conservative narratives, very liberal narratives on things, political correctness, cancel culture. It just goes on and on and on. So there's all kinds of things that I like to observe. And, I observe them from as a psychologist, where I'm looking at consciousness and perception and sensation. I don't mean sensationalism, I mean how people see things. What kind of cognitive images, or what type of ideas, values do people derive from things, cultural norms, all that kind of stuff. It fits into, the science of human and animal behavior, and, mental processes, how people behave, how they think, what they do. One thing that I've noticed with the Ukrainian situation, and it's disconcerting to me, and it happens, I've seen it happen during Vietnam. Of course, I was just a little boy during the Korean War, and I was alive during the Korean War, but just as a little boy. I can remember some soldiers coming home from that, as a little boy. And then, of course, obviously Vietnam, that was something from my era. And then, my son, who was in the military during, the war in Iraq and Afghanistan. He served multiple tours of duty overseas. My grandson is in the military right now. As a matter of fact, he's on a rapid deployment force. He's a tanker. I mean, he's in a tank, an Abrams multi-million dollar brand new tank. As a matter of fact, his tanking brigade has just been re-equipped. They just came back from Poland on NATO exercises about 4 months ago. And he's headed right back over to that area of the world where we're involved in right now. So where am I leading with all this? This tragic situation in the Ukraine, uh, like everybody else, and you can check out the shows. I mean, I'm certainly pro-Ukrainian in the sense that these are people who had a legitimate country and a legitimate government in a country, and they were invaded. I mean, in just the level of devastation for no particular good reason, as far as I'm concerned, is tragic. And it's tragic wherever that happens, and that has to be said. And this is one tragic situation. This is a news event like any other, and it grabs our hearts, it grabs our minds, and then it becomes a narrative, and people start taking all these narratives on. And that's when things get ginned up. And I'm not saying they don't get ginned up, rightly so. There should be righteous indignation in the world for any population, any country, any group of individuals, in my opinion, who are minding their own business, and then they have an aggressor come in and create havoc for them. That's unfortunate in 2022. You would think that human beings are more civilized than that, but they're not. And that's the world the way that it is. And that's a reality. And we have to work around those kinds of things. No matter how emotional we get about that, sometimes we can deal with that directly, and sometimes it takes a while. We have to let things evolve. We have to see where the situation is going, and we have to make not a knee-jerk reaction, but the most responsible and reasonable action that we can do for the good of everybody. And this is my concern with the situation in Ukraine right now. Now, if I was a Ukrainian and I was in Ukraine, yeah, I'd be begging, I'd be screaming, I'd be yelling, I'd be saying, hey, come on, man, can you give me something? Can you do this? Can you do that? I really need this. I mean, they're killing us left and right. Yeah, it's a very serious situation. However, there are caveats even to situations like that. Given the nature of the world the way that it is, not the way we want it to be, but the way that it is, they're being violated by an aggressor who is a nuclear power, who is an unpredictable agent in many ways, and has a history of adversity with the United States, with the NATO group, with other things. And things are not in a wonderful situation there right now. So where am I going with this? This idea that, hey, the Ukrainians are morally correct, and you have to support them all the way to the Alamo, man. That implement a no-fly zone. Make sure you sneak planes in through Poland. Make sure you do this, do that, whatever. All is fair because the Ukrainians may not succeed right now in the short term, but it may be a long-term situation, which I'm sure they're going to succeed at, because I don't think that Russia can hold on to the Ukraine no matter what they do, and the Ukrainian people will just bleed them dry. But at great cost, at a horrific cost, that it would be nice if we could get in there and do something more than we're doing. However, here's the however, but the but that I'm concerned about. But I don't think that we can, and I don't think that we should. And I guess what I also think is that even in hard times like this, I think that the people from the Ukraine and the Ukrainian government should be thanking the United States wholeheartedly, and they should be thanking the NATO countries and thanking their neighboring countries, people that are trying to do everything in many cases that they can possibly do without starting World War III, a nuclear war that not only maybe ends life as we know it on this planet, but certainly will be all the worse for the Ukraine than what they're experiencing now, if such a thing is possible. And it would be. They would be the center of a much, much worse situation than anything that Putin can unleash on them. Being right in the middle of it. And if you don't believe me, look at anything in the Middle East. Look at World War II. Look at Asia in World War II. Look at Vietnam. I mean, once countries start really rolling in a major conflict, you are in the fog of war, man. And you're really, things go sideways in a hurry. As Putin found out, to his dismay, and the Ukrainians found out, much to their credit. They're really holding the Russians at bay. Is there a legitimate chance for an accident, for some type of event to happen if the United States has a no-fly zone or exceeds giving the great amount of aid and support that it already has? Yeah, actually it does. And we have to put yourself on the other person, on their side, even when they're wrong, and saying, how would you look at that? You would view some things as, okay, this country is my adversary and they're supporting these other people, but they're not they're not shooting bullets at us. They're giving bullets, but they're not shooting them at us directly. It's inadvertent. They're at arm's length in doing this, and we are giving billions of dollars to the Ukraine. That's a lot of stuff, and I think we owe it to ourselves, owe it to Europe, owe it to the world, owe it to the Russians, owe it to common sense and critical thinking, not to pull a Dr. Strangelove or a failsafe, crazy, knee-jerk reaction. And I think it starts with people in the Ukraine, the government, Zelensky and everybody else. I know how wonderful a leader he's been and everything else like that, but I think you got to tone it down, man. Even though that sounds kind of petty coming from me, it's really not. You have to think really strategically. You don't really want to bite the hand that's supplying you with a shitload of support and has been for a long time. We didn't start that conflict there. You're not a NATO member and you're not a NATO ally. You may be a fine people, and but there are fine people all over the world. The United States is not the policeman of the world. And every time we try and do that and get involved in a knee-jerk reaction, we go in, we don't have an exit strategy that's clear. We haven't really defined the problem. We really don't know what our objective is while we're there, how long it may take, and an exit strategy to get the hell out of there. And the next thing you know, it's 20 years later. Now, I've seen the same thing happen with the Ukraine that happened with, when the Twin Towers were blown up on 9/11. And I've told that story a million times, It's a terrible situation. The next thing you know, 2 weeks later, everybody's riding around with, American flags on their car, and they're looking to bomb the shit out of somebody who's an Arab. And in my family, people came in, and I, like a lot of people, I knew people that were my dear friends, and they were killed in that thing. I live in New York. Friends that I have worked there. And that doesn't mean anything. I would tell my family, I'd say, you ought to take those, it's wonderful to be patriotic. And I'm a veteran. My son is a disabled veteran. My grandson's a veteran. My father was a veteran. My uncles are veterans. Come on. However, with war, you have to think clearly with these kinds of things. These are big decisions. When you gin things up, when you're rattling sabers and there's flags and there's everybody jumping around and everything, it almost gets like a lynch mob, and that's when people are not thinking and they jump into stuff emotionally and say, damn the torpedoes, man. We're going in. We're pulling a John Wayne. It all looks good, it sounds good, and then 10 or 15 or 20 friggin' years later, you're standing there and some dopey-ass president or some group of people are saying, you shouldn't have left, and what did you pull out for? Were all those lives worth it? Well, maybe they were at the time, but nobody really had a proper strategy. You got involved with something and you couldn't get out. Much like Putin has done that. He's in now, baby. And he doesn't know how to get out and save face. Why would we jump in and do the same thing? It isn't our conflict in that sense. Nor can it be. Because if we square off against a former superpower, there's no match between Russia and the United States and NATO. There isn't. Our military forces are so far superior. That isn't me just saying that. There might have been a time where it was equal or different. No. Putin doesn't want to have a fight against NATO and the United States. Not in any way stretch of the imagination. That's why he's doing the saber rattling with the nuclear stuff. No. He'd never in a million years. It's not going to happen. I mean, it could happen, but it's not what he wants. Because he knows he can't win. He can't even win against the Ukrainians. And it's not like they're an inferior people or army. They're just not even close to the size or have the other stuff. And he's having a hell of a time with them. America has awesome stuff. But we have to use critical thinking and really good common sense when we unleash that power. And we cannot do that for the Ukrainians right now, and I can't see in any foreseeable future the Ukrainians will have to do their own thing. It's like the support. And again, I'm going to say it again. It would be nice for people in America to get a thank you. It's appropriate. And I don't want to thank you in the sense that, we're not, I'm going to repeat that, we're not the policemen of the world. When somebody says, we're giving you $300 million and another billion, and we're sending over boatloads of money and equipment and everything else like that, who the hell do you think pays for all that stuff? We do, I do, you do. Yeah, a lot of people are making money on that in the military-industrial complex and all this other kind of stuff. Government officials and all kinds of ways to look that money. But we're paying for that stuff. It's running up bills for us. So I think it would be wiser for people to acknowledge that it would be nice if we could send over planes and we could have volunteers going there and take your side and man the battlements with you like in World War II. But it ain't World War II. We don't want a world war, and you wouldn't benefit from one. And I think it's rude and hurtful and counterproductive for the Ukrainians because people will get pissed off in this country. I'm a very liberal guy, and I think I'm a very fair guy. I'm not an ultra-conservative or anything, but I'm a patriot. If I was a conservative patriot, and I'm not saying they're wrong, I would be even more pissed off than I am right now. Now, like I told you, I have a grandson, and my grandson will be deployed over there, protecting NATO people as part of our alliance and inadvertently protecting you. He'll be in harm's way. I don't think that people should be trying to shame and blame and guilt us into doing or feeling that we haven't done the right thing. And I don't think I'm going to sound like a Trumpian here for a second. I think the news has done a terrible job of that, with the exception of the regular nightly news on ABC or something. It is so politicized and it is so unprofessional, whether it be one side or the other. I wouldn't care. I was telling my wife today, I said, I can't imagine when I was a younger man, when Vietnam was going on, and we'd look at things, if Walter Cronkite or Huntley Brinkley or Howard K. Smith or Sander Van Oker, or most of you probably don't even know these names. Walter Cronkite was the most trusted man in America. I can imagine if he would have been crying and wailing. I mean, he would get somber. He would get serious about things. But you have people play acting, and it's like they're shaping the way that you view something as opposed to presenting you with information on what's occurred in a professional manner. It would be like me sitting as a psychologist, and I'm a psychologist talking to somebody, and somebody says, yeah, I did this and this, and this happened to me when I was again, and I went, ooh, what? How unprofessional would that be? Or you went to the doctor and you had a sore or something, and you went, ugh. What? He'd be frightening you or upsetting you or whatever. And we have that going on. And what does that lead to? It leads to a knee-jerk reaction. And we don't need that. And I think it should stop. And I think when we hear that, when we hear countries, not accepting all the good things that we do, which are mighty in many cases, we shouldn't accept that. We shouldn't tolerate it. We should just kindly remind people that I understand you're upset, and rightly so, and I might be saying the same thing, but I think it's counterproductive to do that. It's kind of like don't bite the hand that's kind of feeding you, trying to help you, at great expense to themselves. That's what I'm thinking. Now, I know all the saber rattlings out there, the flag waving, everything else like that. Thank you for your service. That's a show that I used to do before. Another bogus piece of bullshit that people get. Thank you for your service. Yeah, it's when you don't have to do anything and somebody else has to do it. You're thanking everybody profusely for their service. There's the other extreme. Because it's the biggest bullshit line that I've ever heard. People are sincere about thanking you for your service because they don't want to do it. Thank you very much. Thank you for 5 deployments and whatever. Yeah, thank you. This is the other thing where you don't get a thank you. It's I need more. I want more, and you didn't give me enough. You're a bad person. Not good. Neither one of those scenarios. So anyway, that's what I'm thinking about. Let's have some news that's presented in a professional, critical thinking kind of a manner so that you and I can make our own kind of narratives in our head based on what we're seeing. Let's not be looking to start World War III and a half because we're emotionally charged up by seeing the realities of the world the way that it is, which is a cruel place that has there's people still sold on the block in slavery all over the world. Yeah, slavery, sex trafficking, drug cartels, abusive situations, murder, genocide, people being put in jail forever. Man, it goes on and on, whether it be in Yemen and China and stuff in our country to a different extent. Come on, man. This is the world we live in. We want it to be the best place possible. We want to do the right thing morally. We want to do the right thing behaviorally. But we can only do what we can do given the reality of the situations. So that's it for me. Just thinking. A thank you would be nice. Let's all be careful and try and help the Ukraine and every other person who is put in a very clear and inappropriate position that's harmful to them and their children and grandchildren, or sad things. If there's anything that we can do without making that situation worse, hopefully we can do it. Sometimes we can't. We can only go so far. And if I've been repetitious with that, I'm not going to apologize because it's very important. We are being force-fed narratives where people want instantaneous changes and solutions and to situations that are just totally unrealistic and make no sense. And people are just fired up and just ready to put themselves either as victims or, I'm a victim, you're an oppressor. You're right and I'm wrong. It's so tribal, so politicized, so lacking in good judgment. It's positively frightening. So that's why I'm doing this show. So have a good one. Bye-bye now.